Well, we are at the World Economic Forum in Davos, but currently, because it's very chilly outside, we are inside and we are in conversation, or we're going to be in conversation with Francisco Betti, who's head of shaping the future of advanced manufacturing and value chains at the forum, which is arguably not chilly at all, but a very hot topic. Francisco, thanks so much for talking to us.
My pleasure, and it is very chill outside. It's -10 almost, so delighted to be here with you this afternoon.
Most certainly. Now, very briefly, for the people who would not know, what do you or what does this team at the forum, which is shaping the future of advanced manufacturing value chains, exactly do?
I lead our team on the future of advanced manufacturing and value chains, which is looking at how through technologies, but also investment in upskilling and reskilling, companies from all across the world can upgrade the way in which they run their production facilities, but also their value chains more broadly to unlock efficiency, productivity, growth, but also business models innovation, enable sustainability, which is a priority, as you may have heard, for every company in the world, and also building the resiliency that we need to navigate the future.
Interesting. So you effectively take a role of a platform, get all the ecosystem partners together, and enable them to, or rather, not influence them, but enable them to take a decision that they want to take.
We are a platform in which all stakeholders, and what I mean all, it's not only the private sector, but also government, academia, and civil society come together to look at how to shape a future of manufacturing that can work for all. And when I say all, it's both large companies, but also small and medium-sized companies, and of course, developing economies.
So through the year, you would say that multiple countries, the heads of state of multiple countries, multiple large companies, multiple mid-sized companies, and multiple consultants have all come together on the forum in order to be able to discuss what's the best way forward.
Absolutely. And the way in which we do that is that we are not just driving the conversation and building the global agenda on the future of manufacturing, but we're also driving very specific initiatives that then help us move that agenda forward, and through which we come up with conclusions, finding aggregated insights that then companies and governments can take back home to inform the decisions they make.
So tell us about a few changes that have happened in the last 12 months. And by virtue of the fact that you would have an insight into how companies are thinking about what will do, tell us also about how manufacturing, for example, or advanced manufacturing will move in the decade, or in the years ahead.
In the years ahead, I think that
first the past and then the future.
Yeah. So if we look at the past and we take a step back, I mean, what we have lived through just over the past 3-4 years, it's some of the most challenging times for manufacturing and supply chains. And you may have seen that we are talking about a poly crisis in our global risk report that got just published, but it's because of the combination of pandemics, climate change, geopolitical tensions, the fourth industrial revolution that brings both opportunities, but also with technology have challenges as well that we need to work on and mitigate. I think that the combination of all those mega trends created what we define a perfect storm for manufacturing, value chains, and supply systems. And I think that what that's created is, on the one hand, an acceleration of the adoption of technology as a way to mitigate and reach the flexibility and agility needed to mitigate some of those risks. But also, when you look at how companies are transforming their footprint, it's creating a diversification of global manufacturing. I mean, when you talk to global manufacturing companies, they will tell you that they remain global companies and they will continue operating globally, but they will be all reinforcing their local manufacturing ecosystem. That's the diversification that is probably needed for them to be able to react to future crises of disruptions that may happen.
Okay, so technology notwithstanding, you're talking about as a principle, it is near-shoring for the own market and then selective offshoring for serving the markets that are present elsewhere.
Many value chains will remain global. I mean, there are some products in which either value chains are already regionally integrated. Think about the auto industry. You know, you have a cluster in North America, US, Canada, and Mexico. There's India is a large car producer, and you have a cluster around India, which is exporting vehicles as well. There's another cluster in Europe, Eastern Europe, Northern Africa, which is well integrated. So I think that it really depends sector by sector, right? But what for sure we'll see is that in order to be more resilient, companies will be reinforcing the regional and local presence. It's not just because technology allows us to do that. It's not just because we need to prevent the risk, but it's also because it's a way to be closer to customers. It's a way to be able to customize, to be faster to market. So I think it's a combination of factors that is driving the reconfiguration of global production.
Very interesting. Tell us, to your mind, what is the most landmark change or the change or a development that has stood out in that either some large companies or some countries or what have you have taken a decision that, hey, we were doing X till now, or a process was X till now. Now let's try out moving in a tangential or a slightly different fashion. What is that landmark change? Give us an example.
I think one concrete, I mean, there are many examples,
Sure.
and especially the pandemic was an eye opener for every company in manufacturing. I mean, maybe a few examples. One, if you look at the manufacturing workforce, I think if there's one thing that companies realized throughout the pandemic is that the future of manufacturing is not about technology. We have been discussing a lot about automation. It's not about technology. It's not about automation. It's about technology and people. Those companies who had invested early on in upskilling, reskilling, were the ones that were able to navigate the crisis in the best way. Why? Because the most flexible machines remain human hands, and the most powerful AI remain, our human brain. So that's a concrete example where we have seen a real mindset change and companies realizing the importance of investing in upskilling and reskilling in workforces. Another example could be the fact that before the last pandemic, I mean, very few companies had real visibility across their supply chain. One of the reasons of why we saw the disruptions that we saw is because no one really knew which were, for example, the levels of stocks of their suppliers, the suppliers of their suppliers. So another big change is that the need to embrace and bring transparency into value chain, transparency and visibility, which, by the way, requires the creation of a digital thread all the way from your suppliers to the consumers. Now, companies, again, who had started early on to invest in technologies that allow you to do that, were able to navigate the crisis in a much better way, and I'm confident they will be able to do so in a better way going forward. I mean, just one more fact that I think it's really shaping how the future of manufacturing is evolving is that those companies that invested in people, in new technologies that create a digital thread, they are not just changing the way in which they make products, but they are transforming customer experiences. And that's a very exciting conversation, because if you think about value creation in the future, that combination is allowing them to think about how to make better products, new products, top-up products with services, or recreate the way in which companies engage with their consumers engage with those products. So there's a lot happening and a lot of change all at the same time.
Interesting. Do you work a lot with Indian manufacturers as well? I mean, a lot of Indian manufacturers come to the table.
We have a lot of companies from India engaged. Yes, we have a good representation overall at the forum from
at
Indian
the forum
companies.
For sure. Oh yes, that's a massive one.
We are working with Tata Mahindra. There's a large group of Indian companies with whom we have been working closely. By the way, we have an initiative which is called the Global Lighthouse Network that brings some of the most advanced manufacturing sites in the planet together in an entire learning journey to inspire the global manufacturing community, and Tata Steel and other Indian companies are part of the Lighthouse Network. So you have some of the most advanced and most forward-looking manufacturing facilities in India today.
Very cool. So what is the biggest delta change that you anticipate will happen during the course of this decade in advanced manufacturing or in supply chains or in a combination of both?
I think it's if we're trying to unpack the question, I think on the one hand we are going to see some change when it comes to the current global footprint on manufacturing. As we mentioned before, there are new locations in which manufacturing will emerge and will become a major driver of the economy.
Is that a cost-led decision, or is it?
It's not costless decision. I think it's the way in which companies are trying to build resilience by diversifying their footprint, by being able to be closer to emerging markets, for example. We're going to have a huge emerging market in Africa in the next 10, 20 years, right? India is racing, and we will need to double the supply of any type of good and product, right? So I think it's the need to find new locations in which manufacturing can take place because of cost, because of the competitiveness they provide, but also because of their local markets that will become bigger and bigger. Another important trend is that I believe that there's a big shift in which manufacturing is perceived. It's not, for new generation, it's no longer going to be that boring, dangerous, type of job that new generations really don't want. But when you look at how the workforce in manufacturing is being augmented by and supported by AI, by 3D printing, by IoT, by augmented and virtual reality, it's it's really forward looking and a very exciting place to be, and a place in which you could develop a very amazing career.
Got it. My final question: clusters of newer industries emerging in India. I mean, if chip making is an example, but beyond that, there is lots happening. Electronic manufacturing, led by production-led incentives, and now we're seeing production-led incentives being a norm across the world. US is doing that. Saudi might do that. Some others are doing that as well. Um, how do you think the companies that are coming together on your platform are taking a call on setting up bases? Well, one, of course, is the local market and being closer to the emerging markets. But two, would incentives win the day, or do you reckon the presence of a large local market would be a bigger incentive?
I think it's always a dual play. I mean, every governments can play a role, the local ecosystem can play a role. I think that companies are really investing significantly in building those new facilities that will allow them to supply both the local market but also to export. And if I look, if we talk about India and you look at how the auto market and ecosystem developed in India, it started to supply locally. Today, this is the largest exporter of vehicles. The same is happening when you talk about electronics. The same is happening when you talk about other type of products. So I think that it always starts locally, but with the ambition and the hope to expand and join global value chains.
Great. Well, it's been insightful. Thank you so much for talking to us today, Francisco, and have a great remainder of the forum.
Likewise. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, viewers. Thanks for tuning in.